Broadcasting live from the Biz 1190 studios in Buckhead, it's the Dana Barrett Show. Atlanta radio that means business. Now, here's your host, Dana Barrett.
All right, we are back. It's the Dana Barrett Show on Biz 1190. You can call us here in the studio, 404-231-1190, or you can help the Twitter stock by tweeting me at Dana H. Barrett or tweeting the station at Biz 1190, or you could even tweet our guest today at Occupation Prof, P-R-O-F. Dan Whitenack is with us. He is the founder of Occupation Professor. He's also a PhD, so he's making me, feel a little slow this morning. Just saying. But he's here because his whole game, it's not a game, it's a business. It's a game. It's both. Is to help you figure out sort of what you actually should be doing with your 40 plus hours a week that you call your job, your career, right? Your life for a lot of people. And I think the bottom line here is you're saying a lot of people are getting it wrong.
Yeah, if you look at the statistics, about half of the American workforce is unhappy with their job, and it's been that way for the past 20 plus years that I've seen the statistics. And so even worldwide, the statistics of people who love their job or like their job is only 30%. So at least at any given time, at least half of the population is unhappy with what they're doing. Now, some of that could be because of their bad boss or a bad company or whatever, but a lot of it's because people picked the wrong occupation. So
I think, first of all, I just want to say I feel like that's so sad. And I've been there. I think, to your point, if it's 50% of the population, everybody listening, whether you're happy today or not, has been there at some point in their career, right?
Right.
So we've all experienced that. The people who are probably can say they're happy now were either lucky that they picked the right thing, smart, maybe lucky, or maybe active. Maybe they took some action to get into a better place. I got to tell you, I'm the kind of person that, and I'm a case study for you, I think, because I have changed careers. I lost count. I don't know, 5, 7, 8.
More than once.
More than once. And then you have my older brother who is a lawyer, who knew he wanted to be a lawyer before he ever started undergrad, and has been a lawyer for, I'm not going to age him and give a certain number of years, but he's been a lawyer for quite some time and still loves it. So he always knew what he wanted to do, and he's doing it, and he loves it, right? So he's like, our family is like a perfect case study, right? So how do you get to be like him and not like me?
I think a lot of times it's luck in many respects. So when I was in college, I was going to be a lawyer too. I was one of those debate geeks, if you will. So I was a high school debater and a college debater. And what do debaters do when they grow up is they become lawyers.
Right.
And I was getting to the end of my college career, and I looked at the lawyers of the world, and I just said, I don't think I've got the stomach for that. I don't have that kind of a mentality or attitude about me. And so I really did the soul searching myself and talked to some people and looked at some resources and thought, industrial psychology is going to be, I think, a good career for me. But I think a lot of people just luck into it.
Yeah.
If you look at how a lot of people find their jobs, or find their careers, it's whoever hires them after college, that becomes their career for a good percentage of the people.
Yeah.
And they just happen into it. It's just serendipity.
Right. And then people often just sort of follow the path of least resistance.
Exactly.
Right?
They're like leaves flowing down a stream. It's wherever the stream will take them is where they go with their careers. And it's sad.
Some offer comes along. Yeah, okay, great. It's closer to my house, this or that. More money, I'll take it. And they just keep going.
Right.
Yeah. So how do you change that? How do you, specifically Dan Whitenack, change that?
Well, I think there are 3 things you should do. So one is you should take stock of what you're good at, because ultimately you're going to be competing in the marketplace against other people that are also going for that same career or occupation. And you need to win those competitions. You need to be better than them. And to be better, you've got to have better abilities than them.
Yeah.
Second, you've got to be interested in what you'd be doing.
When you say interested, do you mean, dare I use a buzzword, passionate?
Passionate, because when you're not at work, it's nice if you're thinking about work to some degree, because if you're thinking about what you're doing, if you're thinking about your products or your services, you ultimately spend more time on it, you become better at it, you fine-tune something, and you compete better in the marketplace against people who are disinterested.
Yeah.
And then the third thing that people really mess up a lot is they should make the career choice based on what's practical for them. So many people make career choices and they decide on a career and they get out and they think, well, making $20,000 is going to be a lot of money, because when you're in college, you think $20,000 is a lot. But when
Yeah.
you get out, you realize it's not as much as you thought it was.
Yeah.
So you should really look at the career based on how much income you're going to have, how much education you're willing to pursue. It should match your abilities. It should match your interests. And if you meet those criteria, you'll be a happy camper.
All right. So you've created a tool for people to sort of help them get some of this out of their own brains. Yes?
I have.
All right. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I created it out of frustration because I have business clients who had kids in college and they kept asking me to help their kids figure out what they should major in or what they should do. And I looked at the tests that were out there and I was just really frustrated by what I saw. I mean, the best test that was out there only included 20% of the occupations that exist in today's economy.
Yeah.
So it's like a real estate agent saying, well, there are 20 homes for sale that you qualify for, but I'm only going to show you 5.
Right.
So that doesn't really make sense to me.
It's an interesting point because I think one of the big, and first of all, I want to say that you mentioned that this sort of tool works for all ages, right? Not just kids who are thinking about college. I mean, so somebody my age could come back in and look for my 8th or 9th or 10th career.
Right.
Just saying. But I think, it is really important because knowing what's out there, because I think kids are still, even today, while they're exposed to more of what's out there, I think depends on who your parents are, what part of the country you grow up in, right? You're only sort of exposed to a small percentage of the kinds of jobs that are actually available.
Right. If you ask the average high school kid or the average college kid how many occupations, list as many occupations as they can.
Yeah.
How many occupations do you think they would list?
I don't know, probably 20 or 30.
About 20.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are 1,200 occupations that are out there. So clearly they know very little about what's out there.
Yeah.
And so it's, there needs to be a tool which measures some things about them and then does that matchmaking for them and says, based on your talents and your interests and what's practical for you, here are the matches for you. Because otherwise it's not going to work. And kids are the primary audience because, they've got all possibilities open to them when you're 20-ish years old.
Right.
When you get to 30, some doors have been closed at that point because many times people have gotten married or they have mortgages or they have kids and there are constraints around going back to school to position yourself for a second career.
Or what you can afford.
Or what you can afford.
Or what kind of risk.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are doors closed to you at that age than there are compared to when you're 20-ish years old.
That's kind of sad, though.
It is.
Just saying. All right. So the 3 main criteria are what you're passionate about.
Your interests.
What you're good at.
What you're good at.
And the practical part.
That's exactly
right.
right.
So the practical part is the one that I'm not liking. I'm just saying, not to be difficult, although I enjoy being difficult. I don't like that. Why does everyone have to be practical, Dan?
Well, it's just, let's say you're 20-ish years old and you want to be, let's say you want to be a physician.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's going to take a lot of schooling.
Yes.
Right. Some people may not qualify for all that schooling. They may not have the financial resources. They may not have the intellectual ability to go through all that schooling. So you got to think along practical terms at some point in time.
I don't like you.
Sorry.
We
just met.
Sure, I'm unfriending you. That's it. We're done.
Taking me off your Twitter list.
That's right. We're done. Well, because I think that's unfortunately. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I think that is, pardon the choice of words, but it's practical advice to be practical.
Right.
But sometimes, don't you have to kind of go for it? I mean, isn't entrepreneurship all about sort of not being practical sometimes? Or
sure. But the problem is, let's say you want to be an engineer, okay, but you don't have very good analytical abilities, or you're not very detail oriented. Those are going to be tough.
I like that little sound effect. Yeah, but here's the thing, right? Okay, I agree with you, but that gets back to what you're good at, right? So I do agree. I always crack up when I watch reality TV, and I've admitted many times that I'm a little bit of a reality TV addict. But when you watch some of the singing shows and people get up there or dancing or whatever, and they think that they have some level of ability and they clearly do not.
I know.
Right. And you're like, don't you hear, if you played that back for yourself, would you think it was good? So I agree with you that there has to be some ability, right? And the passion, that's the easy one. People, I think, often know what they're passionate about or think they know what they're passionate about. But the practicality, if you have the ability, if you are a great singer, to continue that example, even though becoming a singer is not necessarily a practical career choice, maybe you should still go for it.
Oh, sure. And one of the things we list in there is whether the career or the occupation is designated to grow or shrink in the future. So that's really one of the criteria that we let you look at.
Okay.
So we just want you to make sure that you know how much income to expect for certain occupations, whether it's expected to grow or not.
Yeah.
and just be aware of how much schooling you may have to go through if you're going to pursue that path.
All right. Well, it's all good. And I think, like, to your point, exposing people to the 1,200 occupations that are out there is important. All right. You're listening to the Dana Barrett Show on Biz 1190. That was Dan Whitenack, who was kind enough to hang out through that interview with Rob. So Dan Whitenack's still with us from Occupation Professor. And, you know, culture is a big buzzword right now, corporate culture. So when people are thinking about what kind of job they want, it's not necessarily just about what they'll be doing every day, right? But it's also about who they'll be doing it with, where they'll be doing it, how many hours a day they'll be doing it. Is there a ping pong table? Can I bring my dog to work? I mean, right? There's a ton of other things to think about, right?
Well, you're exactly right. And I tell people that when clients or when companies are interviewing you for a job, you need to also be interviewing them, because you need to be finding out what that culture is like. And you know, you can get some of that information through coworkers if you're lucky enough to know anybody who works at that company. But if not, there are some websites out there that can help give you information about culture. There's a website called Glassdoor.com that a lot of people go to learn about what that culture is like, and whether people like working there or not, and if there's a lot of turnover there or not. So there are things you can do as an outsider looking in to kind of get a feel as to whether it's going to be a good match for you. I
think one of the hardest things for people is, and I may just be projecting my own issues onto everyone else, but is really knowing, not only, like I said that earlier in the show, I said that the passion part was easy. I don't know that that's entirely true, because, you know, producer Isaac mentioned on the break that he'd heard advice that if you have a passion for something, you should not make it your job, because then you'll lose your passion for it, right? So if you love working on cars and then you make that your job, maybe you won't love cars anymore. But I think there's levels maybe of how much in love with something you are. And I'm not talking about your personal life, so stop it. But no, you know, like I was mentioning that I had a bookstore, and I do love to read, and I've always loved to read. But when I had the bookstore, I felt compelled to read a lot more than I actually loved doing. So I felt like I had to read 4, 5, 6 books a month to keep up with what was hot, so I could make recommendations, so I could participate in all the store's book clubs and all that stuff. So I still love to read all these years later, but during that period, it was more than I had bargained for. So don't you think that's maybe part of the equation too?
I really do. I just think passion for something is so hard to find, that when you do find something that you're passionate about, and if you have some abilities in that area, you really should pursue it. I mean, I understand the argument that Isaac makes, and it's an argument that I've heard from other people as well. But if you really like something and you're really good at it, you're just in the top 5% of the population, and you should really pursue that dream.
You know, there's a book that's been out since, I don't know, I think the early, maybe mid-1970s, called What Color is Your Parachute? And everybody who is in this field knows it, right?
Right.
And it's been reissued many, many times and all of that. And one of the things, I think this piece of advice came from there, and if not, I'm just going to take credit for it. But I think that one of the ways you can sort of help, obviously you can do things like Dan's Occupation Professor online test to sort of narrow down. But I think even when you've narrowed it down, it really helps to sort of dabble, if you will, in whatever that profession is. So if you are young and you're in your 20s, Aaron, and you can try things, you know, internships, part-time jobs, things on the side to see if you really like it. Because you might think it sounds great. I would love to do X, Y, Z. And then you try it and you find, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be, right?
Well, yeah, you're exactly right. I also, when I do in-person career counseling, I try to get my candidates, my clients, to shadow people in that profession. So if you want to be a lawyer, I know lots of lawyers. If you want to be self-employed, I know lots of self-employed people. You know, so if you want to be an engineer, I know lots of engineers. So I just try to get them together, at least for a lunch, if not for an internship or something else, just to talk to those people and ask them, you know, if you had to do it all over again, would you still go into that profession? What do you like about your profession? What are the downsides of that profession? Just get a little more objective viewpoint about that career, because so many times when you read about a profession, it's one-sided. It's all glowing and positive.
Yeah.
And as you know, there's no job that's all positive. They all have their downsides. And someone who's in the profession can be a little more realistic or practical with you about what it's really like in that job.
You know, I also think it's really unfortunate, and I'm sure a lot of you will agree with me, because it is easier to do those things when you are in your 20s or your teens or whatever. You're, you know, probably up to 30. You said that earlier. Doors sort of start to close. Very sadly, when you get to 30, no, I'm going to go home and cry, but it's okay. But I think what I was getting at is that if you're a career changer, that same advice still applies. It's still good to go out and dabble in some way, whether it's having coffees with people and asking questions, or trying to get in somewhere and try a job on the side, an intern, a shadowing, any of those things. But it's a lot harder to get companies to let you do that when you're in your 40s, right? Like they're like, why is this clown following me around? Right, exactly. It's very different. And I wish that we could, and maybe we're doing that a little bit just by having this conversation. I wish that we could shift the mentalities of companies, because there are so many people who didn't have Dan to help them out when they were in their 20s, but who want to find that perfect occupation now that they're in their 40s or 50s or 60s. And you know, they're willing to work for less or do an internship or shadow somebody or whatever it is, but they just can't get those opportunities.
Right. The second biggest group of clients I have are 30-ish year olds. So the primary group is the 20-ish year old, but the 30-ish year old is a person who always wanted to go into a career. They always wanted to be an accountant, for an example, until they became an accountant, and then they realize, I don't like accounting. Right. This isn't very much fun for me day to day. And so they have to make that shift. And so And to make a shift, I mean, oftentimes you got to go back to school. It's nice to talk to people in that second profession to make sure it's in fact the right profession, because you don't want to go through all that work,
right?
You know, and have another false start, if you will,
right?
And at that time, you've got these constraints, and so and when you change careers, you oftentimes have to take a step back financially. You're going to make less money initially before you get back on that escalator and start making more money. So it's a big decision that many people just avoid.
Yeah, I'm going to just say, don't be afraid. Go for it. Because to your point earlier, you spend a lot of your day, a lot of your life at work. So if you're doing something you hate, if you're in that 50% of the population that hates their job, do something about it.
Right. I mean, you'll be in a career, and the stats are 80,000 to 100,000 hours over the course of a lifetime. So that's a long time to be miserable.
And I'm going to just say, because I like to bring things full circle, we didn't mention it today, but we have our Dana Barrett Show Business Book Club coming up. And we're reading a book right now called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. We are meeting Monday, November 10th at South City Kitchen in Vinings. I bring it up only because in the book, he talks about habits and how habits form in large part. One of the things you need to form a good habit is belief, right? You have to believe in something, whether it's a higher power, whether it's your own ability, whether it's, you know, I just believe it's going to be sunny out tomorrow. You have to actually believe in order for a habit to take hold. And this is the same kind of thing. If you're in that 50 percentile and you don't believe you can change your life, you won't. If you actually believe there's a possibility that you could make it better, you'll make it better.
I agree. And life's too short to be pessimistic and to be negative
and afraid.
It's hard if you wake up every day and you hate going to work, you hate what you do, and you're 40-ish years old.
Yeah,
that's just not very good.
It's not good. So. And you're not good to your family. You're not good to your, you're not good for the rest of your life either, right?
You're certainly not maximizing your potential.
No.
And you were given more gifts than that, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we are running out of time, and I've got a couple more quick notes I want to make. So officially, thank you, of course, to Rob Frohwein, who stopped by earlier, and thank you to Dan Whitenack.
Thank you for having me.
Occupation professor. We'll put links to everything Cabbage and Occupation Professor on our, easy for me to say, professor, on our show notes page at biz1190.com/Dana Barrett.